Hi, my name is Alina, and I am 23 years old. I remember the day I arrived at my husband's house as clearly as I remember the scent of my wedding dress, jasmine mixed with a nervous kind of hope. The morning light fell softly through the car window as I looked at the house that was supposed to be my new beginning. It was big, painted cream and gold, the kind of house that makes neighbors whisper with admiration. I thought, if the house is this beautiful, maybe life inside it will be too. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, like it, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Inside, people were waiting, smiling, polite, curious. My mother-in-law hugged me stiffly, her perfume strong and sharp. My father-in-law nodded once without words. And then there was her, the sister-in-law, a young woman with eyes that carried a quiet challenge. I smiled at her. She didn't smile back, but I didn't let any of it sink in. I told myself families just take time. Love takes time. And I had both. Or so I thought. My husband, Amir, stood beside me, quiet but gentle. He didn't say much, but his presence gave me courage. When we went upstairs later that evening, I turned to him and said, half laughing, half shy, "It still feels like I'm dreaming." He smiled faintly. "It'll feel real soon." I didn't understand what he meant then. That night, the house was filled with laughter from downstairs, relatives staying over, children running, dishes clattering in the kitchen. I sat in our room, running my hand along the smooth new bedsheet, wondering when life would start to feel like mine again. Amir was on his phone, scrolling, distracted. I wanted to talk about our plans, our new life, our little dreams. But every time I started a sentence, his answers were short. "Are you tired?" I asked softly. "A little," he said. "It's been a long week." I nodded and smiled. But a strange silence started to build between us, one that I would later learn to live inside. The next morning, my mother-in-law knocked on the door before I was even fully awake. "You're still sleeping?" she said, half smiling, half judging. "In this house, we start early." I apologized and got up quickly. She watched me as I made tea, correcting me gently but constantly. Too much milk, not enough sugar, wrong spoon, wrong cup. I told myself it was just her way. She was teaching me how things were done here. Later, when I went back to my room, Amir was already gone for work. No note, no call. Just his perfume in the air. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my phone, thinking maybe he'd text to say goodbye. He did in single quotes. Days turned into weeks, and my nervousness slowly began to blend with routine. I learned how to cook her recipes, how to fold clothes her way, how to answer questions about my family without sounding too proud. She liked when I was humble, quiet, and visible. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me in a way that felt like evaluation. Like she was still deciding if I was good enough for her son. One evening, I was setting the table for dinner when she walked into my room without knocking. She looked around slowly at my books, my perfumes, my dresses hanging neatly in the open closet. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made my skin tighten. "You have a lot of clothes," she said finally. I smiled politely. "My mother gave them to me as part of my dowry." She hummed softly, almost disapprovingly. "You're young. You like fancy things. That will change." I didn't answer. She walked out just as quietly as she had entered, leaving the faint sound of her gold bangles echoing in the air. That night, Amir came home late. I was sitting on the bed, waiting for him with dinner. "Your mother came into our room today," I said gently. He looked at me confused. "So? I just thought maybe she should knock first," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Alina, please don't start. She's just being herself. She means no harm." But it felt. "It's fine," he interrupted, already taking off his shoes. "Don't make small things into big ones." That line, "don't make small things into big ones," became a wall between us. Every time something hurt, every time I wanted to speak, that sentence silenced me before he even had to. Over time, I started talking less, laughing less, existing less. But I smiled more for his family, for the neighbors, for the mirror. I became a woman trained to smile even when her voice was trembling. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, I overheard my mother-in-law talking to a neighbor. "She's nice," she said, her tone light but cold, but too proud sometimes. "You can tell she's not used to sharing." My heart dropped. I didn't know what she meant until days later. I came back from the market and noticed a few of my dresses missing. At first, I thought maybe the maid had misplaced them. But when I asked, she looked nervous and said, "Madam gave them to your sister-in-law." She said, "You don't need so many." I stood there frozen, clutching the empty hangers. My chest burned, but I said nothing. I didn't want another argument with Amir. That night, I opened the closet again and stared at the empty space where my favorite red dress used to hang, the one I wore on our honeymoon. It wasn't about the dress. It was about being told silently that nothing here really belonged to me. When Amir came home, I wanted to tell him. But he was tired, quiet, distant. I watched him eat, scroll his phone, and fall asleep beside me without noticing that I was awake. Staring at the ceiling. That was the night I learned the language of quiet wounds. The kind you hide under your breath because speaking them only makes you look ungrateful. And as I lay there, in that big room that didn't feel like mine, I realized something small but sharp. Love doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it just watches silently as you disappear. Outside, the house was silent, but inside me, something had started to shift. A slow ache that would soon turn into the courage I didn't yet know I had. The months that followed passed like a long, quiet punishment. Every morning began the same. The sound of dishes clattering in the kitchen, the smell of parathas frying in ghee, and my mother-in-law's voice calling out orders. I had started to wake up before her now, out of fear more than routine. If she found me still in bed, her expression would say what her words didn't need to. "Alina," she would call out. "Don't forget to iron Amir's shirt before he wakes up." "Yes, Amy," I would answer softly. The word Amy used to feel warm on my tongue once. Now it carried the weight of surrender. Amir still left for work early, returning late and tired. Between us, there was only politeness, not love, not warmth, just careful sentences spoken to keep peace. "Did you eat?" he would ask sometimes. I'd nod. "You?" I'd whisper back. He'd nod too. We lived together, but the distance between our hearts was growing like a shadow neither of us wanted to face. I tried to hold the house together. I tried to please everyone. But the more I tried, the smaller I became. My mother-in-law commented on everything, the way I tied my hair, the color of my lipstick, how I laughed too loudly, or how I didn't laugh enough. One day she said, "You're not like the women in our family. We are simple people. We don't show off." I smiled gently. "I didn't mean to." "You don't have to mean it," she replied coldly. "It's in your nature." Her words stayed with me longer than they should have. I began doubting even the smallest things, what I wore, how I spoke, when I smiled. I started to ask her permission for everything. "Should I wear this today? Is this lunch okay? May I go to the market?" Each time she'd nod or shake her head, as if I were a child learning how to behave. The only space I still thought was mine was my closet, a small corner of the room where I kept the last pieces of my old self. My dresses from before marriage, my mother's shawl, a pair of earrings I'd bought with my first salary. Whenever I missed home, I opened the closet and just looked at them. It reminded me that I used to have choices, until the day that space stopped belonging to me too. It was a Sunday morning. I was dusting the dressing table when I noticed the closet door slightly open. I hadn't left it that way. When I pulled it wider, my eyes went straight to the empty hangers. My red dress, my cream sari, the pastel blue one Amir had said looked nice on me, all gone. I froze, staring at the space where they used to hang, as if they had evaporated into air. I rushed downstairs, heart pounding. My mother-in-law was sitting on the sofa, calmly peeling an apple while the TV played softly in the background. "Amy?" I said quietly. "Did you see my clothes?" "Some are missing." She didn't even look up. "I gave them to Sana," she said, naming my sister-in-law. "She needed them." "You don't wear half of those anyway." I felt my throat tighten. "But they were mine." Now she looked up. Her eyes were sharp, calm. "You're living in our house. Everything here belongs to this family. You don't need so many things to look good, Alina. You're married now. Be simple, be grateful." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. My heart was beating in my ears. "You could have told me," I whispered. Her lips curved into a faint, almost amused smile. "Why, you would have said no?" I stood there, helpless. I wanted to shout, to cry, to ask why kindness had to feel like theft. But I just nodded and went back upstairs because I knew if Amir came home, she would twist the story. And I'd become the ungrateful daughter-in-law again. When I reached my room, I closed the door and locked it. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and cried quietly, not loud sobs, just those broken breaths that come when your heart gives up trying to reason with pain. It wasn't about the clothes anymore. It was about the message she sent without saying it. You don't deserve nice things. That night, Amir came home later than usual. I had dinner waiting. He noticed I was quiet and asked, what happened? I hesitated, then told him everything, how she entered our room, took my clothes, gave them away. I expected at least surprise, maybe sympathy. Instead, he sighed, tired. Alina, please don't make issues out of small things. They're just clothes. They weren't just clothes to me, I said softly. He rubbed his forehead. You know how she is. Don't let it bother you. I looked at him for a long time. You always say that, Amir, don't let it bother you. But what should bother me then? When she gives away me. He frowned. You're overreacting. I smiled weakly. Maybe I am. After he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The moonlight fell across the closet door. It looked like a mouth that had swallowed my voice in the morning. I watched my sister-in-law walk past me wearing my cream sari. She smiled sweetly. It fits perfectly, she said. My mother-in-law beamed with pride beside her. I smiled too, the same practiced, polite smile that had become my survival. Later that evening, I opened my closet again. I ran my hand along the empty rail. Then, quietly, I took out the few things I still had left, my mother's shawl, my diary, a plain white kurta. I folded them carefully and placed them in the suitcase I had brought from my parents' home. Not to leave, not yet, but to remind myself that if one day I had to, I still could. I sat there for a long time, holding the shawl against my face. It smelled like home, like everything I missed about being loved without conditions. My tears soaked into the fabric. I whispered, I'm still here, Mama, I'm still trying. Outside, the house was full of noise, laughter from the TV, clinking dishes, my mother-in-law's voice giving instructions. But in that moment, I felt more invisible than ever. That night, I wrote in my diary for the first time since marriage. Today I learned that silence can be stolen too. Even if I can't speak now, I will one day. Not with anger, with truth. I closed the diary and slid it under the mattress. As I turned off the light, I realized something new. This house might have taken my clothes, my comfort, my place, but it hadn't taken me completely. Not yet, and somewhere deep inside. Beneath the fear and the shame, a small, quiet strength began to breathe again, the kind that doesn't shout. Just waits. The morning after my mother-in-law gave away my clothes, something inside me shifted quietly. It wasn't rebellion yet, just a kind of tiredness that sat deep in my chest. I moved slower that day, spoke less, smiled out of habit. Amir noticed, but only enough to ask, Are you okay? I'm fine, I lied. He nodded and went back to tying his tie, the same calm silence filling the room. It had become our routine, me pretending I was fine and him pretending to believe it. When he left for work, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the closed door. The sound of it clicking shut felt heavier than it should. I missed him even when he was right there beside me. And when he wasn't, I missed the version of him that used to ask how my day was or tell cooking, cleaning, and serving. By the time we sat down to eat, my back ached. But I smiled anyway. As everyone chatted, my mother-in-law suddenly said, loud enough for everyone to hear, Alina still doesn't know how to make biryani properly. I had to fix it again today. Some girls come from good families but lack training. A few people laughed awkwardly. I felt my face burn. Amir looked up for a second, then lowered his gaze back to his plate. He didn't say a word. I wanted to disappear. I forced a small smile and said, I'll learn. She replied. Let's hope so. You're not here to look pretty, you're here to manage a house. Her words sliced clean through me. I looked at Amir again. Still nothing. He kept eating quietly, like he hadn't heard a thing. After everyone left, I went to our room and stood by the window. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Eyes tired, shoulders slumped, mouth curved in a fake calmness. Amir came in behind me, loosening his tie. Why didn't you say something? I asked quietly. He frowned. Say what? When she said those things about me. He shrugged. She was joking, Alina. Don't take everything so seriously. I turned to him, my voice trembling. It wasn't a joke to me. He looked away, tired again. I just don't want fights in this house. Is that so wrong? No, I said softly. It's not wrong. But peace shouldn't cost someone their dignity. He didn't answer. He just walked out, muttering something under his breath. The door closed gently behind him, but it felt like a slammed door in my chest. I stood there for a long time, then sat on the bed and reached for my diary. Dear Alina, tonight, no one defended you. Not even the one who promised to. Maybe it's time you start defending yourself, quietly, with grace. That night, I didn't cry. I felt an unusual calmness, the kind that comes after too many tears have been spent. I realized silence can destroy you, but it can also teach you. It taught me that waiting for someone to choose me was no longer an option. Over the next few days, I started doing small things for myself. I began reading again late at night when the house was quiet. I started saving money from small gifts relatives gave me, folding the notes and hiding them inside my books. I began walking to the market alone, just to feel the air on my face, the kind of freedom I used to have before I became someone's wife. Someone's daughter-in-law, someone's responsibility. I didn't tell anyone about it. It was my secret rebellion, quiet, invisible, harmless to everyone but healing for me. One morning, as I was leaving the kitchen, my mother-in-law said, "Where are you going?" "Just for a walk," I replied. She frowned. "You don't need to go out. Everything you need is here." I smiled politely. "Sometimes I just want to breathe." She gave me a look that said she didn't understand, and maybe she never would. But that didn't matter anymore. Because that day, as I stepped out of the gate and felt the sun on my face, I realized something. Maybe I couldn't change the people around me, but I could start changing the way I treated myself. I wasn't ready to leave yet, but a small part of me had already started walking away, one quiet step at a time. The morning I left began like any other, sunlight slipping through the curtains. The sound of the same kitchen noises, the same dull rhythm of a house that had long stopped feeling like home. But inside me, something had changed quietly over weeks of sleepless nights and silent meals. I had stopped waiting for Amir to ask if I was okay. I had stopped hoping my mother-in-law would soften. I had stopped writing letters to myself because I finally understood. I didn't need to write about change anymore. I needed to become it. That day, I woke before everyone else. My hands trembled as I opened the same suitcase I had once unpacked so lovingly when I first came here. It still smelled faintly of old fabric and forgotten dreams. I folded a few clothes inside, simple ones, nothing fancy. I didn't take any jewelry, not the gold bangles from my wedding or the necklace Amir had given me. They felt too heavy, like chains pretending to be gifts. When I opened my closet, I stared at the empty spaces, the missing dresses, the gaps that used to hold color and laughter. My reflection in the mirror looked different now. My eyes no longer searched for approval. They searched for air. I packed slowly, carefully, like someone folding away a part of her own history. As I zipped the suitcase, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart raced. My mother-in-law's voice came through the door. "Alina, are you up?" "Yes," I replied quickly, my voice calm. She opened the door slightly, peered in, and frowned. "Where are you going with that bag?" I smiled faintly. "To visit my parents for a few days." She crossed her arms. "Without Amir's permission?" I looked at her for a moment. "He knows." It wasn't a lie. He should have known, even if I hadn't said the words. She stared at me, uncertain, searching for the girl she used to control. But the silence between us had changed its shape. It no longer belonged to her. "Don't forget you have responsibilities here," she said finally, her tone sharp. I nodded. "I remember. But I also have responsibilities toward myself." For a brief second, her eyes softened, almost like she wanted to understand. But then she looked away. "Do as you wish," she muttered and left. When I stepped out of the house, suitcase in hand, the air outside felt different, warmer, freer, full of noise and life. I walked down the street without looking back. I thought I would cry, but I didn't. The tears had already been spent in nights when no one was watching at the bus stop. I stood under the morning sun, clutching the handle of my suitcase so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a place waiting for me. But I had something I hadn't felt in years. The first small taste of choice. I rented a tiny room on the outskirts of the city. It was barely big enough for a bed, a chair, and a cracked mirror, but it was mine. No one knocked without reason. No one told me what to wear, how to laugh, or when to sleep. The first night there, I lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, the silence around me didn't hurt. It healed. The next morning, I walked to a nearby shop that had a small help wanted sign. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Sarah, asked me if I could handle customers. I told her I could. She hired me without many questions. That little shop became my world. I swept the floors, arranged clothes, and helped women choose what made them feel beautiful. Some days were hard, the pay was little, and the hours were long, but every coin I earned carried pride instead of pain. I began eating better, sleeping better, even humming to myself sometimes without realizing it. Sarah would tease me gently, "You smile more these days." New love? I'd shake my head. Just new peace. In the evenings, I would walk by the small market, watching people buying flowers, fruits, and fabric. The world felt wider now, not cruel, just honest. One day, I saw a soft blue dress hanging in a shop window. It was simple, nothing special, but it caught my eye instantly. I stopped and looked at it for a long time. For years, I had worn what others chose for me. Clothes that pleased my mother-in-law, colors Amir preferred. But this one was different. It was mine. I walked in and asked the shopkeeper the price. When she told me, my heart sank a little. It was more than what I had. But then I remembered the small envelope where I had been saving my wages. That night, I took out the envelope, counted the notes, and smiled. It was enough. The next day, I went back and bought the dress. The shopkeeper wrapped it carefully in paper and handed it to me like something precious. When I took it home, I hung it on the wall because my little room didn't have a closet. I just looked at it, the soft fabric, the way it caught the light. That evening, I wore it. Not for anyone else, not for a husband, not for approval, not for love. Just for me. I stood in front of the mirror, touched the fabric, and whispered, "You did it." For the first time in years, I saw myself not the version trained to please. Not the woman who walked on eggshells, not the one who cried in silence. Just Alina, whole and perfect, alive. As the days passed, I began writing. It had been 7 years since I left that house with a trembling suitcase and an uncertain heart. Life had changed shape since then, softly, quietly, in ways I could never have imagined back then. My hair was shorter now. My laughter came easier. I lived in a small apartment filled with plants, sunlight, and silence that didn't wound anymore. I had built something steady, my work, my peace, myself. The small clothing shop I managed had turned into my own store. Women came not just to buy dresses, but to talk, to share, to breathe. Sometimes they told me their stories of love, of pain, of rebuilding. I listened, always with the same quiet knowing that comes from surviving. Life had grown gentle again. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the phone rang. The number on the screen looked oddly familiar, like a name from another lifetime. I hesitated. My heart did something strange, part fear, part curiosity, part memory. Then, without fully deciding, I picked up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was thin, trembling, and aged. "Alina?" I froze. "Amy?" A long silence followed, filled with breaths and unspoken years. Then she said softly, "I wasn't sure if you'd answer." I swallowed hard. I almost didn't. "I understand," she whispered. "You have every reason not to." Her voice was different now, slower, emptier, stripped of the sharpness that once ruled every room. She sounded human. "I heard you're doing well," she continued. "That you have your own store. You always had good taste, even as a girl." It was strange hearing her say something kind. The words stumbled out awkwardly, like she was learning a new language called regret. "I just wanted to say," she went on after a pause, "I see you've made a life without us." I didn't know how to respond. My fingers tightened around the phone. She sighed. "I'm not asking for anything, Beta. I just wanted to see you once before." Her voice broke off. "Before time runs out." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, listening to the city hum beneath me, thinking about that voice that once defined my silence. I thought about the woman who told me what to wear, how to speak, when to smile, and the girl who obeyed until she vanished. Part of me didn't want to go back. Another part, the one that had learned peace, knew that sometimes closure isn't about returning to the past, but seeing it differently. The next morning, I packed a small bag. Not with fear this time, but with calm. When I reached the old house, I almost didn't recognize it. The paint was fading, the garden overgrown. The walls looked tired, as if they too had aged with guilt. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the same air that once felt suffocating. Then I walked in. She was sitting in the living room, wrapped in a shawl, her frame smaller than I remembered. Her eyes, once sharp with judgment, now held something softer, perhaps age, perhaps understanding. "Alina," she said, her voice trembling with both joy and disbelief. "You came." "I did," I said quietly. She gestured for me to sit beside her. I hesitated before taking the seat. For a while, we didn't speak. The silence was no longer heavy. It was just there, like two people standing at opposite shores of the same memory. "You look happy," she finally said, her lips forming a fragile smile. "I am," I replied. Her eyes glistened. "I used to think silence was respect," she whispered. "That control was love. But I see now it was fear. I made you afraid to be yourself." "I'm sorry, Alina." I looked at her hands, thin, wrinkled, trembling. These were the same hands that once took my dresses, the same ones that pointed where I should stand, what I should say. Now they simply rested on her lap, empty. "You hurt me deeply," I said softly. "But I also hurt myself by staying quiet." She nodded, tears falling silently. "I know I was wrong." I didn't need her apology. I had already found peace long before she spoke those words. But hearing them still mattered. It closed something inside me that had remained slightly open, like an unstitched wound. After a while, she asked if I wanted to see my old room. I hesitated, then nodded. The corridor was smaller than I remembered. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, the room was bare, no bed, no curtains, no colors. Just dust and memory. And there it was, the old closet, the same one where I once hid my tears, where I'd watched my favorite dresses disappear one by one. Now it stood empty. Its doors half open, silent and harmless. I walked toward it and ran my fingers along the wooden edge. It felt rough, faded. For a moment, I closed my eyes and saw my younger self there, folding dreams into corners. Waiting for love to make a home of this place, I smiled. Not with sadness, but with peace. "Do you want to take anything?" she asked from behind me. "Something from the past?" I turned to her and shook my head gently. "No, the past already gave me what I needed." "What's that?" she asked. "Freedom," I said simply. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "You were always stronger than I knew." We sat together for a while, talking softly about small things, nothing dramatic, nothing grand. It wasn't a reunion of tears or apologies. It was just two women acknowledging the quiet truths of their lives. When I stood to leave, she reached for my hand. Her grip was weak but warm. "Will you come again?" she asked. I smiled. "Maybe, but you take care of yourself." As I stepped outside, the sunlight touched my face. The wind carried the faint scent of jasmine, the same smell that once filled the courtyard. Only now it didn't ache. I walked past the gate and down the same road I had once taken years ago, then with fear, now with grace. My footsteps felt lighter, my breath deeper. Halfway down the street, I stopped and looked back at the house one last time. It wasn't home. But it was no longer a prison either. It was just a place, a chapter, not a cage. I turned and kept walking, my bag swinging softly by my side. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about saying it's okay. It's about saying it's over. And as I walked into the afternoon light, I knew it truly was. The story didn't end with anger or revenge. It ended with quiet strength, with a woman who had once been erased learning how to write herself back into existence. By the time I reached the corner of the street, I whispered softly to myself, "You made it home, Alina." And this time, I meant home in the truest way, where peace lives, not permission. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, like it, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from.